Call the meeting back to order. Please rise for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome our guests this evening and those watching on cable. At the request of the town clerk, I am obligated to read the following. In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. I would suggest that so that we can get back into a reasonable schedule that we tackle our minutes at the end of our meeting. Anyone here for public comment? Okay, the next item then is complete street policy, second reading. I see we have members of our CPC here. Would you like to run for the board?
Thank you. At our last discussion, there were some questions raised that I'm hoping I've addressed, and if not, I certainly am happy to go back and get any further clarifications on these issues. Basically, what I discussed with the Department of Transportation was that I confirmed that the town has the ability to give as much or as little authority to its advisory committee as it deems appropriate, and the committee can be purely advisory, which ours is in our draft policy. Some towns have it set up a little bit differently, but the way ours is drafted, our advisory committee couldn't override a decision or by the DPW or the capital planning committee. Essentially, the advisory committee is giving advice and telling the DPW what it thinks should be done. But there's no formal waiver that would need to be issued if we are in a situation where there was a complete street element that was desirable maybe, but just not feasible, whether financially or for any other reason. We wouldn't have to issue any waiver. Basically, the DPW is only obligated to listen to the advisory committee's advice, weigh its options, and make the appropriate request for funding, or make the appropriate plan for whatever street improvement it wanted to. And the expectation is that the advisory committee would discuss each project and provide recommendations, but final decisions on what projects we would be able to do would be with the DPW as far as funding requests, and with the capital planning committee as far as determination that those funds were available and could be spent that way. Advisory committee recommendations could not override those decisions. And then as far as changes to the policy itself, I reviewed the Town of Reading's policy, which is very similar, but throughout it uses language saying that this policy is to be used as a guide, and they say that a lot. And reading through that, it seemed to capture more the spirit of what I was sensing we were looking for. And I did check with Reading, and their policy was adopted by DOT and approved. So that language seems to be fine. Theirs didn't score extremely highly, but they scored high enough to pass it, and that was sort of the sweet spot where they have flexibility. They haven't overcommitted themselves, but they got their policy adopted. So if there are any questions about any of the edits made, or any of my notes about my conversations with DOT that I put in the memo, I'd be happy to try to answer them. If I don't have enough of the information you're looking for, I'd be happy to contact DOT again and try to make sure everyone is comfortable.
I have a question for the CPC. Is the CPC, if you voted to adopt this or recommend at this point, where does the CPC stand on this?
Sure.
Yeah.
We haven't voted at all on
Haven't voted
recommend
yet?
or not.
Votes,
Go ahead.
they don't need to vote, but
Well, I was wondering if they had taken a position.
oh, sure.
I think generally we would probably want to support this I've done some of the reading in some of the planning magazines, and it's been it's been adopted in many places, and it works well. It helps you, it helps, especially when you're doing design work, or if you have a situation where you're gonna do an upgrade or repair of a street, you look at what you can do to provide a little more flexibility for the transportation.
Well, would it not have some impact on you, for example, the committee comes back and makes some recommendations regarding sidewalks and new developments? I know you have some policies already.
Right.
That would have an impact on you at some point, I would guess.
Well, it would, and, there's, right now, our subdivision control law allows us to, in a dead end or a short subdivision street, we only put a sidewalk on one side, on some of the longer connected roads, there are sidewalks on both sides. Question about the value of that and the maintenance of it, and whether or not, if you put a sidewalk on both sides of the street, you're creating for yourself a maintenance situation 20 years down the road. And so is there a practicality someplace?
I should say too that Complete Streets doesn't necessarily require a sidewalk on both sides of the streets, and I think that the subdivision regulations that have been in place for a long time do provide for really all of the Complete Streets elements that we would want to see. A sidewalk on one side of the street in some situations, sometimes a sidewalk on both sides of the street, where the CPC would have the ability to waive them if they thought it was appropriate, which they do now. Other Complete Streets elements like crosswalk elements at major intersections, bike lanes, and other kinds of crossings are usually not seen in small residential neighborhoods. So I wouldn't expect those elements to impact generally what the CPC does in terms of its subdivisions. But that would be my expectation.
Yeah, I agree that because what we have is pretty much set in stone in our subdivision control law, and I think this is geared more towards places like where we would have a Route 62 situation, similar to what Reading did by putting the bike lane in on Haverhill Street, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
Yeah, refresh my memory. I think you mentioned it the last time you were here, but the makeup of the advisory committee, how did you envision that?
So one of the things that I added to the draft policy is a little bit more detail about the advisory committee makeup. That would be, find it.
Where is that in the packet?
It's down. It's in the agenda.
Page 4,
it's in
the
the-
first paragraph.
I'm sorry.
Page 4, the first paragraph, where it says, upon adoption of this policy, the town administrator will appoint a Complete Streets Advisory Committee of relevant stakeholders to facilitate implementation of this initiative.
Excuse me for a second. Hold on 1 second.
Mhm.
You're in the packet, and it's after the minutes. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And then it says the advisory, oh, sorry. Should I go?
Page 4, second paragraph.
Yeah.
Upon adoption of this policy.
Mm-hmm. The advisory committee may consist of representatives from relevant town departments, including but not limited to the DPW/engineering, planning, health, and the police departments, as well as the Commission on Disabilities and other boards or commissions.
But not limited there too, right?
You okay, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Anyone else?
I think I would like to have the CPC look at it, I guess, in closer detail. And I asked the question a few weeks ago, do we anticipate any zoning bylaw changes or proposals to CPC regulations and guidelines as a result of adopting this, and
I don't anticipate any zoning changes. Possibility of changes to or updates or enhancements to CPC policies, including the subdivision regulations, Off the top of my head, I would guess no, because the subdivision regulations have considered complete streets elements for decades, so I would be very surprised. That's not to say that we would go through the process, and we were asked to go through the process of reviewing all of our policies to determine whether there were any recommended changes, so that would be a possibility.
I guess I would like to know if there
What-
were going to be any recommended changes, what might they be? In other words, what
Honestly-
would the impact of this have?
If we were to change, we would have to begin the process of reviewing all of our policies and spell out what the changes were. No to zoning. I'm going to probably say no to subdivision. I don't know. Part of the process is that this advisory committee would be tasked with that, and the advisory committee doesn't really exist yet, so I don't know.
And the other thing, Warren, you mentioned Haverhill Street in Reading, in the bike path. It's only on one side of the street. And I actually saw someone riding a bicycle on the wrong side of the street using the bike path. So I don't know how much good it's doing here. And whatever they're doing, if this proposal is part of what's happening at the Rotary down in Reading too,
I don't know.
that doesn't look like it's going to work very well, the way that they have that striped out. And I think it is. But anyway,
It's a little confusing down there, isn't it?
it is a little confusing. So anyway, I'm a little bit reluctant to embrace it yet, unless or until I get a pretty good indication as to what adopting it would mean in relation to how the planning commission is going to view it. And
If I
and
may-
propose any, do they envision any changes coming? And I know it's going to take a little bit of a thought process and a little bit of contemplation to go over it, but
Well, I think that probably, as Danielle mentioned, the advisory committee is going to be the one probably to do a lot of the comparing of our policies to what they think this should bring about. So it's going to be, it would be difficult. We may have to at least embrace it to the point where an advisory committee is appointed and let them begin to review how applying the complete streets to our, whether it does require any policy changes. Again, we're compared to a lot of the other towns, our subdivision control law is very, very strong. It does a lot of things, and it addresses a lot of these issues already. So again, it would be something that the advisory committee would maybe review and then say, okay, these are the things we think would work for North Reading, and here are the areas it might work in, and yes or no, there's a policy change required. I agree, I don't think there's much. I can't think of.
I think there would be very, very little, and if we went through the process, I think we would just rescind it if we were very unhappy with what those changes would be.
Yeah.
But I think part of establishing this committee would be to figure out what changes needed to be made and then bring those changes forward. And those, we might need changes, and they might be very good. I'm gonna guess that in terms of what the CPC's policies are, very, very minimal impact to what the CPC already does.
the other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'm wondering if we could, currently the planning commission encourages applicants to set aside funds or do some off-site improvements. Again, I suggest it. I just don't know if this is going to be another tool for the planning commission in evaluating proposals that come before them, which would not normally be a part of what's being proposed.
Can I answer that? The answer is no. The CPC does not have the ability to negotiate off-site mitigations that are not agreed to by a developer, and this policy would not change that. So they can't put anything in their policies that would require more changes off-site. To a current project, they already look at those elements because it's really been enshrined in their policies for a long time, but In terms of new off-site mitigations by private developments that are not on a particular project site, they don't have the ability to do that now unless it's negotiated with the developer and developer agrees to it. And this just couldn't change that. There's no way to take a state policy and state funds and require a developer to make improvements that it's not within the CPC's rights to require.
Other than suggesting and maybe negotiating and getting them to agree to it.
It's still part of the negotiation process. It does not strengthen our position to say, we're a complete streets community and you have to do X, Y, Z. That's just not part of this.
What's the downside of not adopting this?
The downside is that the communities around us, such as Reading and Middleton, and so far 100 other communities have now registered as part of, on their online portal to apply for submitting their policies and being eligible for funds. The downside is really that everyone else will be able to take advantage of the hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction funds that will be made available by the state, and we won't be eligible. That's really the only downside. It's just a question of, do we want these funds or not? And if we really aren't interested in pursuing funds for things like sidewalks or other improvements, then it doesn't make sense to pass the policy.
Catherine?
I just had a couple of questions on it. I hear what you're saying, and I could be reading it too closely. I just don't see that it's reading as such. It looks like this is not just what you just said. This is before when you're saying it doesn't apply to private developments, but it looks like it does. And it also looks like, I'm looking at page 2, under exclusions, that it looks like other transportation infrastructure may be excluded upon approval by the advisory committee. Or in the case of the CPC, approved project by the CPC. So it looks like it does sort of give them more. Our concerns, I think, before we've talked to you about our concerns, but what is the process now for certain waivers, and who has the authority now, and are we granting that over and accepting this to this advisory committee? And I think that was one of the issues, and the second issue was, you know, in terms of costs and funds being available to implement these design elements through this program, it's not going to have any impact on or offset to our other publicly funded projects. But this looks like wherever publicly or privately funded, this will be applicable.
So the reference to private projects, a private street when it's built is a subdivision. So the subdivision regulations require sidewalks already. So yes, this policy applies to privately constructed subdivision roads. What it doesn't apply to is private projects in the sense of requiring off-site mitigation. So is that difference, am I being clear about the difference between those two types of projects? So currently, if you're building a brand new street, you're building a subdivision road. That subdivision road has to have sidewalks per the CPC subdivision regulations. The complete street policy does apply to that. No change is needed because there's already a sidewalk that's required. If we're talking about off-site mitigation, there's a development on a particular road, and people think it would be a great idea for everything leading up to that development to, have a sidewalk built alongside that road. That's not what this is. That we can't use the policy in that way. So by private street, we're really talking about subdivision ways and possibly ways within sites, site plan review sites, a multifamily housing development like, Railroad Avenue, for example, governing the type of way that goes through a site that's not a subdivision but is a private site. Those are already elements that are required to be implemented there, but nothing off of the site.
Okay.
Which, as I said, is something that could be negotiated, but not in relation to this policy. Excuse me. And then as far as
CPC, in other words, is already requiring these particular design elements for subdivisions.
they are, yes.
So if that's the case, if there's a waiver needed, CPC gives the waiver.
Right. They do.
So, that's why you have that language, or CPC.
Right, so we added that just to show that there's no confusion
Yes.
between, if the CPC can waive any elements of its subdivision regulations, that doesn't change. That authority still stays with them.
Then why give the waiver authority over to the advisory committee? Because I think that was our issue to begin with. I think that, at least I had that, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but at least I had that issue of the makeup of the advisory committee and the role and how much authority they might have in terms of something that the city might need a waiver on.
So, I'm sorry, which references?
I was looking at
Page
page
two.
2.
Mhm.
Under exclusion.
exclusions?
You did make a lot of changes there, and you did add that. You did add where feasible, which I think is just definitely more, and I'm looking at the first paragraph, where feasible,
Mhm.
and this includes, and then if you go down to what it excludes, you added these in, right? You added 1, 2, and 3 in, the underlined language is added in there, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I'm misreading it or not understanding what you mean by other transportation infrastructure. That's pretty broad, but it may be, I'm looking at number 3
Number
on that
3.
page.
It's basically another opportunity to exclude something. If something ever came up that isn't a street or other transportation infrastructure may be excluded. That language is kind of used in the state's model policy because we're talking about communities that have transit, they have all kinds of transit, they may have freight rail, they may have big trucking routes. So I think it's intended to be any kind of transportation infrastructure, but it's giving the town another opportunity to exclude something rather than, so the idea of this is we're supposed to consider wherever complete streets elements can be put in any of our transportation infrastructure. If we're a town that has an airport, we're supposed to think about it. If we're a town that has, light rail, we're supposed to think about it. If we're a town that just has roads, we're supposed to think about that too. I think that general language is from the model policy, and one of the reasons that we kept so much of the language from the model policy is because these are graded based on the particular elements being included, so we were reluctant to take out too much. You'll see a few references to transit, but it's, we don't have transit, but we need the points or the policy won't pass. They don't care that we don't have transit. So in terms of what, I guess, is there a concern that the provision in number 3 could potentially introduce some new, so transportation infrastructure may be excluded upon approval by the Complete Streets, committee or the CPC, if it's the CPC project, where it's really not needed. So by transportation infrastructure, we're really talking about our streets and our trails. That's all we really have. So that's just the broad term to capture what we have. Does that?
I think so.
Makes
I mean, you have to think down the line to what we might have in the future. But I also think if you have our planning and our engineering and our DPW, the advisory committee made up of those members who have the expertise to say, well, no, we can't incorporate this element in this particular road or project. I think that's important, and I think that you did make that change, so to define it so that those individuals with the expertise were a part of that committee. So, I mean, I guess as long as it's, I think my issue was how much authority they have. That's what my issue was.
Right.
So, and in doing this, is this gonna drive up costs or take away from, some other funding sources? But I think you said no.
No, none of our Chapter 90, so they would expect us to give them a list of all of our currently planned road improvements, and we would specify what projects we were asking for funds for, so it would all be part of the DPW's plan, so we would consider a list of all their streets we're thinking of improving, and it would also include whether we were requesting anything. They don't want to know about any projects that we're not requesting funds for. They're not interested in, repaving Oak, like the two small streets that connect, Oak and Pine, between North Street and Route 62. Those are on the list for repaving. Those don't warrant a sidewalk. They're too small. They don't want to hear about that. They just leave it off your list. We're not interested. We're not going to evaluate it. We don't want you to issue a waiver. Leave it off your list. We're just not interested. For something big like portions of Haverhill Street or Central Street or Chestnut Street, they want to know that we're paving it, and then they want to know that we would like to add a sidewalk, in say 2018 or 2019, and how much money are we requesting from them to help us with that project. That's really what they're asking us for, as far as specifying where the money would go. Doesn't affect any of our Chapter 90 funds. That allocation doesn't change at all.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff?
Yeah, do you know where the funds for the grants come from?
So this project is funded by the Transportation Bond Bill.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't really know the mechanics of how that works.
Okay.
And this is above and beyond the Chapter 90 funding, so it's another source of funds to do some of the things
Right.
that we might want to do, that we talk about on occasion.
So I guess the reason why I asked that question, I keep thinking of our taxes in the state, statewide sales tax, income tax.
Millionaire tax, oh, that's not here yet.
Yeah. All the taxes that we have, and it's kind of like the rain cycle. All the money comes up from everybody, and then it goes into the state, and then it sprinkles right back down to us in different shapes and forms. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, that this is just another batch of money that is in addition to Chapter 90
Yeah, but
funding.
if you look at, if you go back to our strategic plan and you look at the need to increase, our commercial base, and we talk about, gee, when we go down through Reading Square, we go down through Andover, everything is nice, and we have a highway going through town here. And, there is some effort now to try to improve the look of the businesses, and there's stretches, for example, that call it no man's land, where there's no sidewalk, and then there's sidewalk and things like that. And it would seem to me that as part of an overall plan to improve that whole area and to, raise our commercial base, that if we could get some funds to do some of these things that fall into the no man's land, we'd be ahead of the game.
No, I understand the concept. It is somewhat of a,
So, I don't know, I mean, this is if I read it right, it's an advisory committee, and nothing happens without funds. So they can propose to do something, and, we might get some state funds as a result of it, but I'm sure we gotta have some town funds, and we then have to have some kind of an authorization to go spend the money. I think there's enough controls in place. So I guess I'm less concerned maybe than some of the rest of you.
Mr. Chairman, may I offer a suggested change for number 3? Because I understand, as I'm reading through this, I understand what the concern is, I think. Could I suggest that we change it to infrastructure may be excluded upon approval by the DPW director as advised by the Complete Streets Advisory Committee? To exclude certain streets. I wonder if the wording the way it is now does give too much power to the advisory committee. So if we were to change that to DPW director as advised by the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, would that be, do you think that would change it to be more in line with what we're thinking?
I almost think flip that, I'm sorry, I almost think the reverse of that. It may be, as the advisory committee is advised by the DPW director, that's what I think. how it currently is running. I don't want these people to lose their ability to say, or authority to say, that is a design element we're not able to incorporate, or we can't afford that, or it doesn't work there. You know what I mean? I don't want them to lose that ability and then no improvement is done because it's locked up with, you know, having to get the approval of a committee.
Right,
But the DPW director, according to this, will be on the committee anyway, so we'll have a voice in terms of
Right,
the review or waiver if necessary.
right.
And the planning is there, and the engineer, city engineering will be
Right.
there.
And we say elsewhere that the DPW director is, you know, has final say over what funding requests are made. So I was wondering if bringing back the DPW director in that provision might be.
I don't think your suggestion changes anything. It's still the way that you worded it, as advised by the advisory committee.
He's still advised, yes.
No, but it makes it the advisory committee is telling the DPW director what approach to take,
Yes.
which is not what I'm necessarily in favor of.
No, I think the DPW, what I would want to make sure the setup is that the DPW director maintains his authority, but is given advice by the advisory committee. In a purely advisory capacity, we think you should do this, but it's his final decision about what the funding requests would be, or what the projects would be. If it doesn't help, then forget I said anything. I just thought that it would help to reinforce that it still is the DPW director's decision about what projects are done and what funds are requested. But, so rather than, if the way this is worded makes it seem as though it's the advisory committee that has to exclude things, well, no, maybe it's the DPW director who needs to exclude things. The way, and so just to ensure that there is no power that's taken away from the DPW director. That was my only.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Yule?
Yeah. It seems to me that even though it's an advisory committee, it's all being generated through the advisory committee, the ideas, okay? And that even though you're advising the DPW director, it really sounds more like you're telling him what to do. The committee's, the committee's telling him what to do. Because if he doesn't, then now we have a battle going on between an advisory committee and DPW director. And that would have to be dealt with, okay? Because if he's not on board with what your suggestion is, and the advisory committee feels strongly about what they want to do on Main Street, then I can see a big battle there. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest with you, but that's what I can envision. So it sounds more like, to me, it's a strong advisory committee in that regard.
Well, I think we do say elsewhere that the final decisions are with the DPW director. I think the advisory committee really is purely advisory. That's all.
Yeah. I guess my other question, my turnaround question to that is, if the DPW director has an idea that he wants to implement, okay, and he brings it to the advisory committee, because it exists, says, listen, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you advise to me how I can do it? I mean, is that in your ideas, your thought process?
The advisory committee is expected to consider all of the transportation projects that the town is thinking of doing and offering a recommendation. And then the DPW director decides what to do with that recommendation. If the DPW director chooses to go to an advisory committee or any committee to ask for advice or a feedback on a particular idea, I don't see why he couldn't do that.
Mr. Gilberto, do you have any opinion or comment regarding this?
I think for discussion purposes, I'm going to orient our conversation back to the reconstruction of Central Street a year ago, which was an area that came up before this board. It wasn't on an agenda, but it was a subject of discussion I think maybe during a DPW budget presentation, if I remember correctly. And what came up in the discussion was that there was an expectation from the Planning Commission and its subgroup on pedestrian access and sidewalk safety, I don't remember the official name of it, that had recommended a list of 10 locations that ought to be candidates for sidewalks to be added. And during that discussion, these locations were provided to the DPW. The DPW had a pavement management plan that called for Central Street to be paved in sections in calendar year 2015. And it came out that the project had been in a planning phase and was basically contracted at that point to reconstruct the road. And it was a surprise to some of the stakeholders that the sidewalks weren't included. I think that the town was probably justified in not including the sidewalks because of the cost factor associated with it. But nonetheless, there were individuals involved in planning access around town other than by vehicle, namely by sidewalk, that were surprised. And from my standpoint, what I see this advisory committee doing is being really the voice to ensure that that all of those factors outside of vehicular access are being considered when we're making improvements to our ways. In the end, the answer may be it's not feasible because of the cost, because of the requirement to take private property to do it, because the residents involved don't want to see it occur, any variety of factors. But the way I've seen this since it was originally proposed is that it would formalize that back and forth between the Public Works Department, which is really solely, other than with the final sign-off of the town administrator on a contract, developing these plans and going forward with construction. It's a check and a balance to make sure that these options are being evaluated. From my standpoint, the obligation ends at, have we considered these options? And if they are not feasible, then we won't proceed with them. Conversely, if we look at our town and if we look at our road system and our existing infrastructure to get around by foot or by bicycle, and we determine that we really don't want to see any changes made or any improvements made in those areas, then perhaps the policy isn't right for North Reading. I don't know that that's the case, but that's the other side of it that I see. So those are my comments that I would offer. More opinion than anything else.
Mr. Yule.
Yes, if I may work off your example of Haverhill Street. Now, Central Street, I'm sorry. I mean, what really changes here? The DPW had a hearing concerning sidewalks. At least one hearing, anyway, concerning sidewalks, where there were a lot of exchange between the community and the DPW director on suggestions or requests on adding a sidewalk to the process. And technically, that's through Chapter 90, that whole process, that whole conversation. The only thing that we're adding here is another conversation that would eventually have to come back to the DPW director anyway for that department's approval on feasibility of doing it and the funds. Nothing's really changed except we added a new advisory committee. That's the only thing that's really changed, because the conversation was had. And I would assume that on all situations, even with a Main Street, that you could still have that same conversation without having the advisory committee and still come up with the same ideas that an advisory committee may suggest. So, I mean, do you really need an advisory committee to do what you can already do right now?
Okay.
Just to add to that, the only thing is you're grabbing a raindrop now. Going back to your analogy with the raindrops coming out from the state, there's additional funds that are tied to this. That could give us an opportunity to do these things.
And I do understand, that's a thought that I'm holding in my thoughts right now, so.
Michael, you raised
I just would note that the way I would envision it would work when I take the Central Street example and apply this to it is that as the Public Works Department is looking at its capital outlay for the next 3 years or whatever period it's able to look at for planning purposes, as it's slotting projects to occur in particular years, it would be doing so with the advice of this advisory group to aid in its planning. It may not change things. In the example of Central Street, because of the significant cost associated and because of the fact that the road had degraded to such a poor level of quality, it probably would have had to have proceeded anyway. And that was the feedback that we got last year, regardless of not having the advisory committee take place. But the way I envisioned it when Danielle first brought this up, when the town engineer first provided his input on it a while back, was that it would memorialize that place for the discussion of transportation other than by vehicle to take place. But in the end, it would be the public works director who would make the recommendation based on the town's needs as to what construction projects would advance. That's the way I've seen it would work. And that's the way I would expect it would be implemented. I've looked at the town planner if I've misstated that.
No, I thought that's my understanding too. The reason we suggest the advisory committee is because we would really be required to have one if we adopt a policy. Certainly, we could do all the activities you're describing without any of this, but we wouldn't be eligible for any funds, so there would be no opportunity for sidewalks.
Mr. Chair, I just have
Yes.
one final thought, if you don't mind. I understand, and I basically understand that if we don't join Complete Streets, we're gonna lose out on $400,000 a year. So I understand that, okay? And it's not gonna move over to Chapter 90, they're not gonna say, well, no one wants to do Complete Streets, so let's put the money in the Chapter 90 funding where it should be, well, I think it should be anyway, but they're not gonna do that. So they're just gonna create another layer, okay? And this is where the complexity of big government kind of comes into play here. So I understand that we're stuck in a place here, our decision is really that it's not if we accept this program, it's how we accept this program. And otherwise, if we don't accept this program, we're gonna lose out the opportunity of $400,000 a year.
I think it's unlikely, oh, sorry. Can I just say regarding the funds, I just want to correct, I doubt that the $400,000 will be available every single year. That's a possibility, but now that so many towns are signing on, it's probably not every
Whatever.
year. Yeah.
Whatever.
Warren?
Well, two quick comments. Having a policy that interfaces with our surrounding communities probably doesn't hurt either, because if we work on, any way we work with a town line, we'll have, corresponding policies to make sure that what gets done matches up. But going back to Central Street again, kind of focused on sidewalks there, but if we had the advisory committee before, they may have gone down that street and said, there's 3 or 4 little streets that come to the street right there, and there should be a crosswalk right here. And so those are the things that gets missed, because so it's not just sidewalks, and a crosswalk is a matter of just some paint for the most part, or identifying it, getting it approved, and then putting it on the ground. And there may be 2 or 3 places that encourage walkability and make the street safer. So there's more than just sidewalks involved here.
I guess, Mr. O'Leary.
Just looking at the proposed language, the advisory committee may consist of representatives from relevant town departments, including but not limited to DPW, engineering, planning, health, police department, as well as Commission on Disabilities and other boards and commissions. I mean, it's going to fall on the town administrator, I guess. I mean, how expansive is this going to envision it being? It appears as though the suggestions are utilizing people who are already in town hall anyway, or on various boards anyway. Are you looking to limit it to something like this? Which, to me, if we're going to adopt it, would be a good thing, because I'd rather keep it more in town hall and force the group to come together and look at things maybe a little bit differently than we've looked at. Because when we're talking about redoing streets and things of that nature, I mean, pretty much everybody's involved here. Maybe the Board of Health isn't, or the Commission on Disabilities may not have been asked to opine, but police, sometimes fire, DPW, engineering, planning, they're all pretty much on board and involved anyway. I don't know how much thought you've given. I mean, how expansive do you intend it to be? And really, if all we're going to do is include someone from the Commission on Disabilities, maybe 1 or 2 others or something of that nature, in order to qualify for some funds, and still maintain some control within town hall and with the appropriate department head, which is the DPW director, as far as what projects go forward to the capital improvement committee for funding and approval, then I have less concern. It depends upon who's gonna be on it.
Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I envision it, and I was, I think, an advocate to the town planner, that it be a smaller group advising, and really that it be less of a standalone committee and more of a process for evaluating internally what we're advancing for construction to take place. And probably most importantly, having those stakeholders who might have the perspective that's beyond just traditional transportation in a town of like ours, to assist in prioritizing, to say there isn't enough funds to do all of this. Where are the most important areas, and how can we take this limited funding, and get the most out of it? I really saw it as an internal business practice from a policy standpoint, rather than a standalone group. I really foresaw it being just really part of our standard capital planning operations, more than standalone. That's how I envisioned it.
So how can we memorialize that, so it doesn't get beyond that? To me, this thing could, hopefully he's here for 40 years, but this position can change, and people's ideas can be very different, and again, it can create a conflict, as Mr. Yule was kind of alluding to, whereby the DPW director saying we can't afford this, and all of a sudden, capital improvement planning committee's being, there's nothing wrong with dialogue and discussion or debate over things, but we don't need to be, fighting amongst ourselves unnecessarily. So how can we create that vision?
Mr. Chairman? So I think that the balance that the town planner and I have had with the engineer, and to a lesser extent with Mr. Moylan, is will the policy be approved at the state level? And it needs to have certain features that are in it in order to meet their goals. Now, if those features don't meet North Reading's goals, then the policy's not right for us. And I say that because we should be approving things in policy that we think are right for the town of North Reading. From my standpoint, perhaps what we can do is look to alter the presentation and the flow of the policy to reflect what's been described here, which is more of an internal work policy and planning policy than anything else. The risk, I think, is that it may not be able to pass muster with the state with regard to it.
I believe we need a committee. Now, how we set up that committee is entirely up to us. If we want to say it's capped to 5 people, and these 5 people are, and we name them, we can do that. I don't know that we can just say that we're going to have an internal practice, a best practice of always looking at that. I mean, we are committing to that, but I think they want to see a committee. I don't think
That's fine with the committee, but I just think the role of the committee is key. What role are they going to play? And how do we get it memorialized? Because this becomes more broad-based as opposed to, it's subject to interpretation and changes rather than what we're talking about tonight, maybe.
You mean in terms of who's on the committee, or in terms of what they actually do?
Yes.
Warren.
Yeah, the way I envision it is that if the town comes up with a project to do work on a particular street, and that project goes out to the police department and all of the things, as you mentioned, everybody takes a look at it and says, yeah, I don't see any issues with this, and they send it back. But what this advisory committee would do would look at it from, there'd be different stakeholders in it, and they would look at it with a little more critical eye to see if something like a crosswalk or something like a yield sign or something, or a speed limit change or something would make this particular rebuilding of the infrastructure safer and more friendly to pedestrians and so forth. So I think there's a role for it, for this advisory committee that goes a little beyond, because they get handed the same program that would be put together. Say that the town engineer say, okay, we need to pave this particular section of this roadway, and they would look that whole project over a little more thoroughly from a different, a little bit different standpoint than with the police department or the fire department or just the perhaps town engineer.
So I'm hearing two different.
Mr. O'Leary?
Yeah, I think we're hearing a couple of different approaches.
I'm getting to the point where I don't believe we'll resolve this tonight, and I'm wondering what would be the best approach to maybe have a member of the CPC, our town planner, member of the board, maybe the town administrator get together and kind of take what's been discussed tonight and see if we can't create a document that will meet the state's muster and satisfy our concerns. Yes, Mrs. Mattingly.
I just wanted to either ask or add a comment, or maybe while we are having a discussion about this, further the discussion, if that's okay with you. Mr.
Yeah, sure.
Chairman. So, I think the way, to me, the way that the advisory committee language is fine, because it does, I agree with you, hopefully he is here for the next 40 years, but it does seem to put people in place that need to be in place, and the other eyes on it that are looking at it from a different perspective. But I think the raindrop or the funding, that $400,000 is just the carrot that's being dangled in front of us to accept this, and then we do change all of our regulations. It's a requirement. So what it's asking us to do is change everything, and it's right there, and we shall change these things. All of our rules, all of our regulations, all of our policies, everything gets changed based on this policy, implementing these things as part of our own laws. So that's permanent, a permanent change from this. But my thing is, you already answered this, I think, at this meeting and the last. We're already doing it. So there really is nothing that we're gonna have to review to make any, law changes or guideline changes, because we're already, as a matter of course, in all of our roadway improvement projects, we're already doing this.
I would say that the CPC is already, has this in its regulations already, but I think we would be obligated to go through our other bylaws to look at whether other changes needed to be made. For example, we definitely don't do complete streets in our transportation planning. We've never done a sidewalk project. So is there a firm fixed policy that the DPW has about its street paving? No. So that's not an example of a policy that would need to change, but in terms of a general practice, the DPW would start thinking about how to incorporate these elements into its roadway projects. I don't think that they've really previously been considered all that much, but they've been considered a little, maybe in recent years. So that there would be some change, and I could anticipate that there might be some bylaws that might get reviewed that may need a change, but I don't anticipate that any of the CPC's bylaws would need to be changed.
Then for me, just in terms of this issue, because again, long-term adoption of this, and we can rescind it at any time, but it's requiring us to make those changes if we do adopt it. So it does have a long-term impact, whether or not the funding is there, or it's just for 1 year or 3 years and then it's gone. So I would want to know that, exactly what proposed revisions, planning documents, master plan, open space and recreation plan, zoning and subdivision codes, laws, procedures, rules, regulations, guidelines, programs, and templates we would have to modify if we adopt this. Can you give us a list of that? What you think, if we're doing it already for some things and not others, what of those would we be considering for modification once we adopt this? Because it says we shall.
Right.
It doesn't say we have the option to, but that's the long-term consequence of, or it's not necessarily a negative consequence, but that is a long-term ramification of adopting this, whether money is there for us to pay for it or not down the line.
Without having reviewed everything, I can't answer you for sure, but I can't think of a lot of town bylaws or templates or plans that really address this. Our open space and recreation plan is due to be done again in 2 years. I don't know how much complete streets would work its way into that. It might. but at that time, I think that's the time that we would look at that. Our master plan is due to be redone again. We're hoping to do it next year. Certainly, I think that would be a factor, but that's going to be a factor anyway, because I think it's a priority for planning for that to be looked at. In terms of other things, in terms of templates, like decision templates, no, I don't see, I don't know about other decisions that are issued by other boards. I mean, certainly nothing to do with zoning, nothing that the Zoning Board of Appeals would do would come into this. I think it really would be, it would be almost completely limited to the CPC and things that the CPC is involved in, like the open space plan, like the master plan, future transportation planning. I see this more as future plans that would need to be redone every few years, and at the time, we would go ahead and we would make those appropriate changes. You're right, it does say shall, and the reason we mention things like zoning, which I don't think any changes would need to be made to zoning, but we have to mention it. We have to tell them, we'll make sure our zoning bylaw conforms. Can I tell you today that our zoning bylaw conforms? Yes, it does.
I
I can't tell you that for everything, right? And I can't really tell you everything because I haven't reviewed everything, the whole town code. But I think we would have an obligation to look at those things and make changes we thought were appropriate.
I mean, and I'm comfortable. I think it's a good idea, especially if we're already doing it. That would be my opinion. Is I'm comfortable moving forward with it, with the language changes that were made, because I do think it's a good idea, especially if we're already considering all of these elements with things that we're working on as it is. But that's just that's how I feel.
Well, we've spent a fair amount of time discussing this evening. We have the following options: to adopt, not to adopt, to send it back for further modification. And if that's the case, I would suggest that we have at least one board member, maybe two, sit down with CPC
If the board wants to do
try
that,
to work
I'm
this
happy
out
to-
prior
I'm happy
to
do that.
bringing it back to the board for further discussion and adoption. What are the wishes of the committee at this point?
I think that's, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good suggestion. I think if we do that, we'll have a voice in that conversation, and hopefully we can come back with what the consensus of the board is.
Well, maybe I should, even before we go that far, just get a general consensus of where the board is. I mean, I can support it as it's been modified. I think Catherine just stated that. If both you and Steve are still concerned, then I think we need to go back to the, not necessarily the drawing board, but go back and
Right.
see what
Tweaking it.
concerns can be addressed by modifying the language.
I would volunteer unless someone else, I can, if you want me to work with
Well,
Danielle.
you're fine with the way the wording is,
I am.
is that right? So,
I think it's fine the way that it is. It gives enough leeway, but
yeah. I have a lot of respect for you,
Mr. O'Leary's silent.
Yeah, I'm not fully embracing the concept, but not fully
Yeah.
embracing the proposal as put forth. Because to me, there's so many unanswered questions. And again, it's a new thing, and it's requiring us to do specific tasks, create some different way of looking things, but different lists and listing of projects, prioritization of projects, probably reprioritizing some projects. And again, unless I know what the makeup of the committee, and again, Mr. Gilberto's vision of it, I was fairly comfortable with. Mr. Pierce's vision of it is a little bit more expansive, and I'm not totally uncomfortable with that, but again, maybe there should be some other people included, other than some inside town hall. So, to me, we're being asked to to approve a policy, modify our thought processes and behaviors without knowing how we're going to implement it. I guess that's my hang-up. I would like to know what we're going to do.
Are you concerned with the list on the back part of the document? Because from my perspective, if a committee is formed under this, that needs to be reviewed, and I would expect that it would look different when we get done, when they get done. I don't know where this list came from, actually.
Well, it looks like they put a lot of effort into creating that list, and then they ordered it in terms of what was,
I think it's a requirement as
Top
part of
priority.
filing with the state and approving this, because from the point of view, what are we asking for? We're asking for some funds to do something. It's almost like the cart has been put before the horse here with respect to forming the list.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the, that's the mitigation, the list at the end? Oh, yeah, okay, that's the mitigation?
Right,
Yeah.
they actually ordered these in order of priority.
They're in a ranked order.
task.
Right, 2016 priority level?
Estimated
Okay, is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
Same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think, with all due respect, I think that since we have the bigger issue with it, maybe one of us,
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
be on there, and we can work it out that way, and hopefully we don't come back with something that you don't agree with.
I mean, at the rate we're going, we could spend a couple of
I
full
know.
board meetings,
Right,
and I think it could be done more efficiently.
And I'd have your
Offsite.
5-page policy into 50 pages, so that's probably a good idea that someone else does. So,
Still,
yeah. In all fairness, they have done a great job in pulling this together, and worked hard to get it,
Mhm.
trying to get it right and to meet our expectations. So I think that, I think we need to acknowledge that, the work that they put into it.
I'm sorry, is that the hazard mitigation project, or is that?
That's what I thought that was. That's
Yeah.
the mitigation.
This-
oh, well,
Yeah,
it
you
was
had
right,
me
it
on
was
that.
right after
Yeah,
this,
it's
so I
not-
thought.
Yeah, it's just the
not
next
bad.
agenda item, that
Well,
was there.
I'm
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
it's got nothing to do with that, okay.
That's what I thought.
They did a good
That's
job
a-
working on
Alright.
this.
Oh, no, I'm not talking
sorry,
about this.
too.
I'm talking
All
about
right.
the job that
Maybe
that
what was-
Danielle
I
did.
take back what I
Yeah, but
said.
maybe what would,
That's
and again,
that's
Yeah.
what I thought it was, because it followed your policy.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
It's a separate agenda.
I
Mr. Chairman,
mixed it up, yeah,
maybe
you're
what
right.
would
I did too.
maybe what would assist me in climbing on board here with this is an implementation plan, just like a side letter, as to how do we really envision it being put into practice, and who are the players going to be. Then I would be able to, and again, in general, I like to keep things sometimes broad, to give us some flexibility, but by the same token, I like to know what I'm getting into too, and what the expectations are going to be in relation to the workload, and, what's already done, what isn't done, what's the workload going to be. And again, we're pulling on other department heads, people within our departments to do additional tasks here now, and maybe some other outside members of the community to be involved. So, to me, it may be more of an implementation plan before I embrace a new policy and adopting something new. Again, I don't know if you're of the same mindset. But I think that should be part of it, at least for me. Again, if I'm in the minority, that's okay too.
I'm sorry, just clarify what you mean by implementation plan, about how,
But we have someone who's going to be charged with the authority and
Right.
responsibility of putting together this advisory committee, and I assume giving them some sort of a charge, even though the charge is here
right?
to a certain degree. So as far as meeting the charge of the policy, what is that really going to involve as far as work? The workload for current employees within town hall, and, the recodification of things and reprioritization. What's it going to take in the way of resources? What do we anticipate a timeline for implementation? And, can those demands be met? Again, I don't like to look a gift horse in the mouth as far as, supposedly free money, but I'm also skeptical of it too. We're buying into a new policy and program here, we're gonna invest some resources, human resources, in order to implement this new policy, and, truly what's gonna be gleaned from it, and what's the practical aspect of implementing it, what's it really mean? And I don't know that until I know how the town administrator envisions really what the needs are gonna be of this committee, and who's gonna be asked to participate. So, the language can be somewhat confusing and ambiguous. I guess sometimes that works in our favor, sometimes it doesn't. But I think, to me, it's, can we afford to do it? And how much in the way of additional resources is gonna require us in order to implement it, to qualify? If we're just, vote this thing through and all of a sudden we're eligible to, apply for funds, my guess is those communities that get into it, dive into it, show that some changes have been made, they're looking at things differently, those are the ones who are gonna get the leg up. If that's the case, what's it gonna take us to do it and get there? Otherwise, adopting it and then never applying for any funds, no harm, no foul. Get a few other people to, look at our prioritization of construction plans and transportation construction plans, that's fine.
Yeah, but I would guess that when you're applying for funds, you're defined a priority project.
But part of the responsibility of what's gonna be approved by the state is in our policy, we have committed to look at the recodification and reviewing of our plans, reviewing of our bylaws, show that we've done it, and I would expect at some point we should be able to implement some sort of changes in order to show that we're doing and thinking and working differently. I just don't know, I can see this being, taking on a life of its own and taking up resources that are very valuable at this point in time, of people who are specifically mentioned in the policy, who are pretty busy. So, what's it really gonna take,
So-
I don't have the answer.
So what are you asking for?
So what I'm
You're
saying
you're asking for some kind of,
an implementation plan.
plan
just
that says these
it
are the
quantifies-
resources we need to maintain and move forward. with
Order
this.
to implement, not to because we're required to take a look at things and look at it differently.
Yeah.
What's it really gonna take? I mean, I'm hearing very little in the way of, we don't think there's gonna be any changes, we don't think, at least from the zoning bylaw change standpoint, but I don't know.
All right. I guess at this point, the only decision I can make is to table it for the time being while we ask the town administrator maybe to kind of document a implementation plan. Try to get some idea of what resources are going to be required. Mr. Yule?
Yeah, and didn't you also have the suggestion that it be limited to pretty much those who are on this?
Well, I mean, it's certainly easier to maintain and enforce the participation level and things of that nature. But to Mr. Pierce's point, we need probably some outside people looking at it, or
Well,
include recreation
we're
or
not in a
whatever.
position based
Right.
on, at least where I sense people are, board members are. There's only 4 of us here tonight, so we can't vote it up or down, so I think that's our only alternative.
It's, again, if what I'm asking is deemed to be unreasonable by the majority, don't make them jump through the hoops. That's okay.
Well, my sense is there is no majority.
Well, no,
unless
you
I'm
were
misreading it,
comfortable,
right?
and Kate, we're comfortable with what's been presented. I'm
I
not there
am
yet because
comfortable with what's been presented, and I
Right.
think Kate has expressed that. I sense that Mr. Yule and yourself are not. And we don't have a 5th member this evening to vote one way or the other. I'm assuming it would be 2 and 2. If I'm wrong, someone speak up. Mrs. Minipelli.
Well, I don't think you're wrong, but, I mean, I think the implementation is in the policy, and that advisory committee is Upon adoption, TA appoints, advisory committee starts that review of all of our policies, rules. It says it right there. The next step would be that review for any changes, and then starts to take a look at all of our projects. So
But
it's
it's
kind
going
of,
to, yeah, excuse me, but what it's going to take is the specific people that are mentioned here to participate in that process.
Right.
And for those people to participate in that process, it's going to take hours and hours and hours of their time to focus it on this. I'm just, we need to be able to quantify it and identify a timeline. And again, if there's a funding source and there's timelines associated with it, we need to know that too. I know there's funding that was available that's not available because the state doesn't have their act together and isn't able to put any money out. But I don't know when the next cycle is and whether or not, from a practical standpoint, we can have some meaningful changes implemented and in place to impress the hell out of them so we get some money. So,
Steve, I don't know, I look at it a little differently. Right now, we have the Chapter 90 road program, right?
Mhm.
The DPW director, with the help of a consultant, has put together a plan, which is based on a combination of replacing roads, repairing, resurfacing roads, and just doing general maintenance on roads. And aimed at spending a certain amount of money per year, which gets you to the point where you never have, after a period of time, you don't have any totally disaster roads in town. You've made a big improvement. So I look at this as, there are some available funds out there, and it's our responsibility, if we want to participate and get these funds, is to find some projects that make sense, that would enhance the town, right? And to present like we do for Chapter 90. We just don't go and say, oh, we got the money, now we're going to go do whatever we want. We basically have to submit what we're going to do, right, before we can spend that money. And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, sitting in the back there, but I think that's the process. I don't see this being any different. Catherine?
just one more question while you're there, if that's okay. And the other thing it's saying is we're supposed to seek a grant for the implementation, so perhaps that's to accommodate what you're considering are gonna be hours and hours of, efforts put towards the review and stuff. What, if you do know, what sources of funding and grants are available for us to be able to implement this in the way that it's calls for implementation through the advisory committee?
I don't know of grants right now that are available. Basically, our financial obligation would be to pay for the designs. So right now, the funds that we have to pay for the first project that we were hoping to do, which was the Haverhill Street gap in that sidewalk, that was funded several years ago by the Planning Commission's Community Development Fund. And also they've paid for bid documents in order to be able to get this really shovel-ready. That's one source of funds. In terms of outside grants, I don't know what they are. I haven't yet heard them talked about. I don't know if they are, I don't know if they exist, or if their expectation is just that we'll use Chapter 90 funds for that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But in terms of deadlines, they just did recently announce that they anticipate for projects taking up to 9 months that hope to be done next fiscal year. They want to see the first round of applications July 15th. And the next round of applications in October. So I think people are going to start applying and they'll start getting allocated.
All right, where are we? Are we still split at this point? Mr. O'Leary? You still have concerns?
It's okay, I'm only one.
What?
I'm only one, yeah.
Well, Mr. Yule,
Conceptually, I have no problem with the idea. Just to answer a question for me, these design plans that we have to go, I mean, there's an expense for those as well.
Right.
That can be very expensive, correct?
Right. And if the
Okay, so
funds
we-
aren't there,
So
we
there's
can't.
$400,000, and we have to have a plan design to present, correct?
Right.
So we can spend the money on a plan design and then present it, and if it and if it costs $200,000, is that,
No,
no? I don't know, I mean,
no, it'll be less than that.
okay,
Yeah.
$100,000? 15?
Depending on the project.
I don't know,
20,
I don't know,
50.
see,
Yeah.
depending on what you want to do, I mean, Main Street, I would assume would be an extremely high cost of plan design,
Right, so,
correct?
Right.
So it can't cover a gambit. So whatever it is has to come off the money that they give us, correct? No, it comes
right.
it comes off in reality, meaning that if it costs us $25,000 or $50,000, all right, to have plan design, and they give us, you know, it cost us $400,000 for the project, then it really costs us $425,000 or $450,000, correct? That cost the town.
Because the 400 would be for construction. We
Right.
never get that money back for what we spent for design. So it's the same process as the TIP funds. When we ask for the state for big reconstruction projects or big transportation projects, you're expected to pay for a 25% design, and then they fund the construction. So it's the same process.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We get the $400,000, it cost us $50,000.
Right.
Correct,
Right.
okay. But if
The
it-
point, though, Jeff, is that if we decide we need to do something, whether it's adding sidewalks to a particular road, right, or painting lines, or creating a bicycle path down some street, right, it's something that we decide to do, and we go after funds to do it, right? So we'd be making that investment. The concept here is that if we don't join, then anything that we want to do is on our dime completely, right? So, to me, this is a win-win. And if you decide that it isn't working, you can withdraw. I don't understand why we can't bring this to some kind of conclusion. Now, if we can't go any further with this, I'm just gonna ask that we table it, and we'll put it on a future agenda. Because we've got a lot of things on our agenda, and we're already 45 minutes behind schedule.
I think we're going to approve this anyway, I think, down the line, okay? So, we just might as well move forward, so I'll go with,
All right, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the second reading of the Complete Streets policy.
second.
Second by Mr. Yu. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
The motion passes 3-1,
happy to move forward.
with one absent. Adopting the hazard mitigation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Adopting the hazardous mitigation plan update. If this is going to take more than 5 minutes, I'm gonna skip it.
Why do we even have to talk about this? Let's just do it.
Mr. Gilberto.
So, Mr. Chairman, as the town engineer indicated, the draft plan as was presented to the board a couple of meetings ago reflected months' worth of planning work done by the local emergency planning committee, some citizen input that took place in at least one public meeting, the feedback from multiple department heads, and had already been preliminarily reviewed by state and federal officials, if I understand it correctly.
It was reviewed by FEMA and MEMA.
So all of this was aimed to bring to the board something that would pass the standard of the federal requirement, ultimately the federal requirements. The board's feedback was there are a couple of areas in the included hazard mitigation project listing that we'd like to see adjusted. So we made two adjustments. The first, as identified, I believe in number 4, was to add language that would call out that we would further evaluate the newly constructed middle and high school for its potential use as a shelter location. And that would be in addition to the shelter location we presently use at the bachelor school. The second issue was with regard to language concerning the public works facility and its use for emergency response. And in that particular area, which is number 11, we modified it so that it states, evaluate and potentially modify DPW garage to better accommodate severe weather event or disaster response. As it was identified previously, it was more aggressive in stating that we were going to make changes. We've altered it so that it would be evaluate and potentially change, again, if necessary. The final note is with regard to building a storage shed for a season's supply of rock salt. We had that as a more immediate need. We pushed it to the 2016 to 2020 window as a less urgent need, more of a planning effort than anything else. Again, remember that ultimately this plan is designed to have the town prepare for its response to an event that may occur, whether it be a storm, damage associated with a storm, or some other natural hazard that might be out there. But also to plan for what steps we might need to take in anticipation of it. And these projects, which is where I think the bulk of the board's concern came from, are the projects we've identified. And what this allows us to do, if approved, is to go back to the federal government. If we identify one that we want to advance and make requests for funding for, we can ask the federal government for funding to cover, I believe it's 75% of the cost of the project with a 25% match. And a recent example of this that I think most of the board is familiar with is a reconstruction of a culvert over the Martins Brook, if I remember correctly, from a few years ago. We weren't ultimately able to proceed for a variety of regulatory reasons, but that would have been reimbursed at 75% by the federal government. The final note is that I believe we've addressed the concerns by the board. We were asked by you, Mr. Chairman, if this could be included as an addendum rather than incorporated in the policy. We did contact the consultant who works with the federal government, and the feedback that we got from them was that's something that you more generally see with a regional plan that encompasses multiple communities. It's not generally seen in a plan that's tailored for a particular community like this one is. And further, we do retain the ability to modify the plan at any point in time. So we would ask for the board's approval of this policy. It does tie back to some financial interaction that we have with the federal government to seek reimbursement for this particular project as well, which the federal government is, through a grant funding, is it 75% of this?
75% of this.
So the planning itself is actually reimbursable by the federal government at 75%, but we really, again, we hope that we've addressed the board's concern, but the board's approval tonight will allow us to, will give us a chance of trying to meet the requirements of getting the funding in by the end of the fiscal year, as the finance director nods her head at me.
Okay, discussion from the board. Catherine?
Quick question. These are already identified, they're already on a priority list. Who is responsible for advancing these for consideration?
I defer to the public works director, to the town engineer.
Public Works, town engineer.
So they would come and say, okay, well, this is number 5, but we need to get it done now. We need
Well,
to,
I would look at these as moving forward as hazard mitigation funding became available.
okay.
I wouldn't look for these to be funded out of local funds unless there was a dire need.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I'm afraid to speak.
I don't believe that.
No, that's true. I'm fine.
I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Yule?
Yeah, it must be a good idea because our finance director had this huge smile on her face when we said, it'll be funded. So it must be a good idea.
It would be a hit to free cash if it's not funded, so.
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan update and to read the certification of adoption and authorize the chairman to sign.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
With one.
Okay, we'll start our 8 PM informational hearing.
You want me to read
I
this?
apologize to, no, I don't think you have to read it.
Okay.
Want it read?
The hearing?
Do you
Oh,
need it
oh,
read?
Well, just note that
Oh,
we're
I'm
gonna
sorry.
waive-
No, this is.
I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. Catherine, you're talking about the hearing on the warrant? Yes, I do.
I need to read this like we just voted. Okay. Okay.
It hazard mitigation thing?
Yeah, I'm
It
just,
said to
Will you
read it.
just sign that then?
Are you talking about the memorandum from the?
No, it looks like it
no,
was,
it does say to
No.
read
Oh,
the,
it does say to read it, okay.
through you, Mr. Chairman, to the board's clerk, it does request that the resolution be read if possible.
Okay, I will read it. Certificate of Adoption, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts, Board of Selectmen. A resolution adopting the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan Update, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts. Whereas the Town of North Reading established a committee to prepare the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan Update, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts, and whereas the Town of North Reading participated in the development of the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan Update, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts, and whereas the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan Update, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts, and contains several potential future projects to mitigate potential impacts from the natural hazards in the Town of North Reading, and whereas a duly noticed public meeting was held by the Board of Selectmen on May 23rd, 2016, for the public and the municipality to review prior to consideration of this resolution, and whereas the Town of North Reading authorized responsible departments and/or agencies to execute their responsibilities demonstrated in the plan, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the Town of North Reading Board of Selectmen formally approves and adopts the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan Update, Town of North Reading, Massachusetts, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, adopted and signed May 23, 2016, by the Chairman of the Board, Robert Messeri. Okay. We have an informational hearing, June 16th town meeting, and
June 6th.
when-
6th. 6th.
the June 6th
June
town
6th.
meeting, yeah. No, where's it? Oh, okay. I think we're set to go.
Have we read the hearing notice, Mr. Chairman? Or did we?
No, we did not. I thought there was one.
No, I have not read the hearing notice.
No hearing notice? Blank? There'll be no reading of the hearing notice this evening.
Is it in the,
No, it's
Hang on.
not.
The sixth member of the board comes through.
I would just ask if we read up until town hall and then waive the rest of it.
Okay.
Captain?
Notice of informational hearings. The North Reading Board of Selectmen does hereby notify the residents of the town of North Reading that hearings on the following articles contained in the June 6, 2016 annual town meeting warrant will be held Monday, May 23, 2016, 8 p.m., room 14, Town Hall.
Is there a motion to waive
And,
with the reading?
Move to waive the.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule.
These-
Discussion, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Mr. Gilberto?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we've done for prior town meetings, we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation that's intended to go through each of the warrant articles. This is for the edification of the public who may be in the audience or watching the meeting at home in advance of the June 6th, 2016 town meeting. Different than perhaps prior presentations is that for all of the warrant articles for which I believe the board is in a position as of tonight to make a recommendation, the board's already made those recommendations and they've been included in the warrant. So I don't believe there are any that you'll be asked to make recommendations on. We do have a separate item on the agenda to discuss town meeting warrant articles if it were necessary, but again, where the recommendations have been made, I really think this is more for the public than anything else at this point. So, and we will put this PowerPoint presentation up on the town website tomorrow. With that, Just a note for the public, as of April 22nd, 2016, balances in the following funds: free cash, approximately $839, stabilization fund, just over $2 million, debt capital stabilization, just over $1.1 million, water stabilization, $542,000, cell tower fund, approximately $489,000, the ambulance fund, $778,000, the OPEB trust fund, approaching $275,000, for a total of available funds of approximately $6.1 million. Article 1, the FY 2016 budget amendment. Again, review of the FY 16 budget continues, and any transfers that are being requested will be presented at the meeting of June 6th at the high school. And you can, just for the edification of the board members, the motion being made by the board member making the motions identified in the second to last bullet, and the presentation, if necessary, is identified in the last bullet. There are a couple of where we had some feedback as we deliberated in printing the warrant that we thought we would discuss with the board, but those are flagged and we'll note them for discussion. Article 2, the FY 2016 snow and ice deficit. This would be a pass over with no appropriation required. Article 3, the transfer of funds into the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund, which is used for capital purchases and for debt service. This article would propose to add $467,000 from free cash, part of which would fund the operating budget. Article 4, this would propose to transfer in $54,787 from retained earnings into the Water Stabilization Fund. Article 5, this would be a proposal to pass over due to a challenging budget year with no transfer into the stabilization fund at the June town meeting. Article 6, fiscal year 2016, transferring of funds into the solid waste stabilization fund. We are proposing that $30,000 be transferred into this fund. And again, this is funds projected to remain in the FY 16 budget come June 30th. It is a projection as of this point in time. Article 7, this would be a transfer of funds to other post-employment benefits liability trust fund. Funds that are available to remain in the FY 16 pension and benefits budget are proposed to be transferred into this trust fund in the amount of $230,000, again transferred from the health insurance budget from savings associated with the new Medicare eligible retiree health insurance plan that went into effect as of January 1st, 2016. Article 8, the selection of town officers, which authorizes the board to choose town officers not specified otherwise. Article 9, to hear reports of town officers and committees. Article 10, routine, authorizing the DPW director to accept easements for drainage and other purposes. Article 11 authorizes the treasurer to enter into compensated balancing agreements, which again is routine. Article 12, similarly routine, would authorize Chapter 90 construction. We anticipate receiving $510,258 from the Commonwealth in fiscal year 2017. Article 13, prior year bills. At this point, there's one bill totaling $25 to date that has been identified with a funding source from the FY 16 pension and benefits budget. Article 14, the naming of the corridor at North Reading Middle School. We had this noted as being a motion by Mr. Yule. However, we did note that we didn't know whether the board would want to have the board move to approve or the petitioner, which is the school committee, petition to approve. And obviously, the presentation would be made by the school department should a presentation be made. We just noted that the board had already designated Mr. Yule, but where it was submitted by another elected board, we wanted to confirm that the board's desire was to have Mr. Yule presented.
Recommendation.
Yeah. The school is not going to make the motion, we're not gonna, and I'm not going to give the motion, not the motion, but the.
I thought we,
The
So we
school committee was
concluded that
gonna,
the
school
school
committee was gonna make the
committee
Make the
motion.
motion,
And
right.
Mr. Yule was gonna deliver the Board of Selectmen's
Right,
recommendation.
recommendation, right.
Thank you for the
That's what I was trying to get
clarification.
out.
Thank you for the
I don't know
clarification.
why it was so
Yeah.
hard, but,
you're off the hook, yeah.
oh, no, I don't mind doing it at all.
Thank you for the clarification. Article 15 would rescind authorizations to borrow for authorized but unissued balances for various borrowing authorizations that have already been approved. They are $10,761 for water department vehicles, approved June 4th, 2012, and $292,000 in ambulance replacement, approved June 1st, 2015. Article 16, appropriation of free cash for bond appropriation. This would be $1,169.25 appropriated from free cash to replenish a capital account for modular classroom purchases as approved under Article 14 of the December 5th, 2006 town meeting. Once appropriated to replenish this account, we would then reappropriate that balance against the proposed fiscal year 2017 capital improvement plan, Article 21, which would allow for a reduction in new debt in that amount. Article 17, the reappropriation of funding associated with the Tower Hill anchor bolt repairs. The balance of the appropriation is $77,568. That project has been abandoned. We would propose to reappropriate that balance against the FY 2017 capital plan, Article 21, to reduce new debt. Article 18, the planning, design, and land acquisition for the MWRA water interconnection, a total cost of $1,125,000, all of which is proposed to be bonded against the water enterprise budget at this point in time. Again, subject to the board's continuing deliberations regarding the overall funding of this project in the future. This is a 2/3 vote because of the borrowing required. And you see the breakdown of the different areas. There are 4 sub-areas we've identified, one of which is the acquisition of land associated with a pump station location near the Reading border. Article 19 would authorize acceptance of water from the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, authorize a petition to amend the MWRA enabling legislation to extend into town, and authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute necessary agreements and documents. This would be a majority vote. Article 20, the FY17 operating budget, as you know, voted as 2 motions, one from available funds and one for debt service. And I believe that after our last board meeting, the Finance Committee took up its recommendations as well, and that both the Selectmen and the Finance Committee recommended the same budget. Is that correct, Madam Chair?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Article 21, the capital budget, which was presented at the, I believe, the May 3rd, trying to keep my dates correct, May 3rd, May 7th meeting. This is the same list that was identified at that hearing. And I would note, again, we're using 2 prior articles for reappropriation of unexpended funds, Article 16 and 17, in the amounts of $1,169.25 and $77,568. Article 22, $166,000 to fund retirement obligations anticipated in FY 2017. Article 23, the appropriation of funding for special counsel legal expenses. This would be an appropriation of $150,000 from the overlay into a special article for this purpose. We also have unexpended funds from the FY 2016 operating budget, which we would encumber into FY 2017 as well. So this will only be the straight appropriation of the $150,000, and we will encumber FY 16 funds for use in FY 17.
Do we have to encumber those funds? Were they in an article? I don't recall.
They were in a transfer into the FY 16 operating budget.
Okay.
Article 24 would fund repairs to town buildings.
Excuse me, just on that other one, could we take the unencumbered funds and put them into this article so that it wouldn't be subject to timelines? We could do that? You know, rather.
It's within, you know, it says from available funds.
I'm just thinking, you know, if we put it all in one article, one bucket, then it's there, it's available, no timelines and reappropriations necessary. And you can,
That's a good suggestion.
So we'll prepare the motion and the slide to reflect both this $150,000 and the unexpended balance from FY 16.
does it make sense, Mr. Chairman, you think?
Are we living within the four corners of the article?
I believe so, yes.
You think
Yeah,
so?
appropriate, just appropriate money for special
Yeah,
counsel.
okay.
Liz, you've looked at the article language, you're comfortable that it's,
Does that make sense, Liz?
That's fine with me, it's easier on me that way.
I'm trying to make it easy for you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
thank you. Article 24 would be to fund repairs to town buildings, and these are for projects that would not ordinarily qualify in the capital planning process. We have a slide that identifies them, and I know, I see my little friend up there, I know that
Can you zap 'em?
it's kind of hard to read this slide, but the board is well aware of the issues with regard to the library elevator. This would be for an upgrade of the elevator CPU units, which were advised by the contractor would avoid the elevator being out of service for long periods of time if we upgrade the equipment. Again, we do not believe at this point that the equipment itself that the elevator itself needs to be replaced, but that this CPU unit is a source of much of the difficulty that we've been having.
I still have a concern, and the concern is that the elevator, I talked to library director just the other day about it, is still making noises, which, tells me that, either there's wear in the rails that guide it up and down. I'm not 100% convinced that changing the controller is gonna resolve that issue, but I'm not the expert. But I know we've had trouble getting resources there to look at it. And I'm just
This approach was, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
I'm
you.
just concerned that there's more likely some wear and tear, bearings, whatever might need to be replaced. And I'm surprised that didn't come up. I'm not suggesting it has to be replaced, I'm just saying that mechanical parts wear out. Electronic parts don't necessarily wear out. They might break, they may die, but I'm just hoping that we got the right information.
This was a result of, I can tell you that after getting some feedback from a firm in which ultimately the confidence level wasn't as high as I think we all would have liked it to be, this recommendation came from what appeared to be a very informative visit by a second firm. And we are, of course, walking a fine line that these are licensed individuals who determine whether an elevator is safe to be used or not, despite the noises that we are all hearing with our ears, or the challenges that we have seen and observed over the past year. This was the best recommendation that they could give us at this point in time to try to address the concern. We can ask for a report relative to the physical infrastructure inside the elevator. Perhaps that may address the concern that you've identified.
I can't correlate the controller causing some of the noise that's being reported. I may be wrong, but. Jeff?
Is the elevator hydraulically driven, or is it, for lack of expertise, a pulley system?
I think it's hydraulic.
That's my recollection, but I couldn't say that with 100% certainty.
But actually, it's not just a single, two-story. It's from the basement all the way up to the
fourth floor.
third floor. So it may not be.
May not be hydraulic. Yeah, I could see one floor, but not that many floors. But the noise that you're concerned about is a moving noise versus.
Well, I mean, you get in a lot of elevators, you get into them, and you once in a while you hear a noise, as the cable isn't running smoothly and you get a little snapping noise. And maybe that's all that it is. The fact that a door doesn't open or something like that, that could be the controller. It wasn't stopping in the right location, that could be the controller. Or it could be, more than likely, sensors that tell the controller where the elevator is. I know we had trouble getting someone out there to look at it, and I know it took a while. I just hope we're getting the right results, right, information, that's all.
I can get a report to the board as to what the findings were and why this was recommended. Maybe that would address some of the concerns.
I mean, did they say that sound would go away, that noise that Bob's talking? I mean, that,
No,
I believe
Jeff,
that-
it was doing other things that were
Yeah.
not.
well, I thought, I would assume that somebody came in to look at the whole
And the
picture, not
report
just-
right now is that it's functioning properly from the point of view of, it's not stopping,
It's
a
just noisy.
foot,
Right.
the doors aren't opening at the wrong time, but it's still making some noise.
We, through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe we gave them the very specific instruction to fix it.
Yeah.
In general, all of the issues that it was having,
Okay.
and this was a finding that came back with regard to it at this point in
Okay.
time. But again, I understand the concern and the reason for the question, and we can provide a report that's more detailed as to why that's believed to,
Well,
what the issue's believed to
did
be,
they
how that was
provide a
solved.
breakdown of what the, breakdown of the cost?
I've not seen it, but I believe it's been provided to the building superintendent. The second area is replace the west side exterior window casement on the two top floor windows. Again, this is the area where there's been water damage to the building envelope, estimated at $13,000. And a third area, we have dislodged slate roof at the Damon Tavern, as well as a gutter on the east side of the building, and an issue with the chimney stack on the east side of the building. Again, building envelope items are not a significant cost, but they need to be addressed in order to maintain the integrity of the building, which does have a tenant in it, as the town is aware.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Yule?
they did some work, or is that, it's already paid for, I guess, they did some work in the foyer.
They did, it was covered by insurance proceeds, I believe, relative to ice damming that took place, and there were pretty significant bowing in the floor.
Yeah.
The senior center, repair the east side interior stairwell ceiling, which is deteriorated. Again, not a huge number, but something that needs to be addressed. Looking here, trying to make the best out of the existing systems here in the town hall. This is intended to adjust the HVAC controls here for our heating system. And this last one is 6 plexiglass windows, which is basically the window tinting that's been aimed for efficiency and for security purposes throughout the building. The most recent area being the front side of the building that was done. This would be the next step at $2,500 for a total of $50,000.
Questions?
Article 25, transferring of funds to other post-employment benefit liability trust fund. This will be funded at $250,000 from the raise and appropriate. It was built into the budget in fiscal year 2015 because of the challenges, fiscal year 2016. Because of the challenges due to snow and ice, we reduced it to $125,000. It's been built in at the full amount of $250,000 since day one of our budget process for FY 2017, and we've maintained it funded at that level, despite the impact it has for making funds available for our everyday operations. And it represents 100% of the required deposits for new hire employees, with the plan being to continue to fund the new hires' OPEB liability on a year-to-year basis. Would note that when we look at the FY 2015 audit and the OPEB actuaries report, we're going to probably need to adjust that number to reflect the updated information. That'll be on the board's agenda for the meeting of the 20th, June 20th. But we won't be making any modification to FY 17's number.
Okay.
Number 26 is funds for the design of facilities at the Arthur J. Kenny Field. Again, it's a code compliance issue, public restrooms for the stadium, and the amount is $50,000 proposed to be funded from free cash for design. And that could be a retrofit of existing facilities at the site or the construction of a new building. Article 27, funding for planning studies for housing and transportation. It was $40,000. It's been reduced to $25,000. Again, similar to the discussion about the school committee's warrant article, I believe the CPC has submitted that article so that they would be the appropriate entity to make the motion, and that Selectman Prisco would report the board's recommendation with regard to it. Articles 28 through 36 are revolving fund accounts. Conservation, the Damon Tavern, Rain Barrel, Recycling, Elder Affairs, Emergency Management, Youth Services, Library Activity Room, and the Board of Health. And for the public, these are funds through which the receipts for the department are then appropriated back for related expenses, separate from the general fund. Article 37, accept Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81U, Paragraph 12, which is the use of security funds for the town to complete subdivisions. And this would be, again, a mechanism that would transcend any particular subdivision, but its need was highlighted relative to some ongoing work at the end of Charles Street. And again, motion would be made by the Community Planning Commission, and the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen reported by Selectman Prisco. And Article 38, citizens petition, bylaw providing for the disposition of civil traffic infractions arising in the town of North Reading. Today, we received a communication from the petitioner asking to cancel the petition. I am not aware of a provision in the general law, town bylaws, or other location where a petition can be canceled, but it would appear that the petitioner, who is not a resident, does not wish to see this petition move forward for consideration. It is on the warrant. It has been mailed to each home in North Reading. And the board, we will consult with the town clerk and make a recommendation to the board as to how to handle this, given that the board does not recommend, nor does the finance committee recommend this particular article.
You can acquiesce and make a motion to pass over for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, be happy to do that.
The board would like to pass over,
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the board can do that.
as opposed to defeat.
Defeating it?
Well, then a motion has to be made in order to defeat it. And if a motion isn't going to be made,
Well, yeah, motion by Bob Messeri or petitioner up there.
So again, this would be a citizen's petition, the lead petitioner not being a citizen. So it's not clear to me who exactly would be making the motion if the board did not make a motion.
I think, barring the fact that there's no petitioner. we'll
if
just
there's no
move to
motion
pass it
made,
over.
then the moderator will just pass on it, or ask for a motion to pass over.
I would just note that the board has the ability to pass over, or if it were so desired, if we were to so desire, because the communication we received was that the individual may be back at a future meeting with potential changes to this. Another option would be to ask town meeting to act and potentially
And to
defeat.
vote it down, yeah.
Something the board can think about and decide on the 6th as well if
Right.
they wanted.
Okay, that's another option.
I only say that because the board specifically took a position that it does not recommend.
But all that means is that he can't bring it back for a year, right?
2 years.
2 years, is it 2 years,
I
Steve?
think it's 2 years without the permission of the finance committee if it has a
Right.
financial impact.
Okay.
So,
Can I just ask on this? This says he may not be able to attend. He
Yep.
can't make the petition
yeah,
anyway.
but that's dated.
Is this an old
Again,
It's old now.
I think
It's
we
old
would
now.
have faced parliamentary issues as it is because the
Yeah.
individual's not a resident.
Right.
He can't make a motion anyway.
Even if he were not seeking to cancel
Um,
the petition.
So he'd have to have a citizen in the town make this motion.
Correct.
Someone that signed his petition.
yeah.
Who's happened to be a registered voter, right?
Right. So,
But that,
I'd like to send a message.
Okay, any questions regarding the articles? We've already
The
gone
public.
down and
Yeah.
voted on them. Anybody in the
I'm
audience
sorry?
have any questions? Okay,
If there are none, Mr. Chairman, I can thank the department heads who came and stayed for the hearing this evening. Thank you for your time.
now, close the informational
Thank you.
hearing and we will move on. Let's go back and do the minutes. So we have March 28th executive session. I think we're going to bring that up in another meeting. Is that my understanding?
Yes. Hold it, table it.
Table the March 28th, 2010 executive session. I have a motion to table. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, we have the minutes of April 25th, regular session.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the April 25th, 2016 regular session
Thank you.
minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. May 5th, 2016, regular session.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the May 5th regular session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We have a regular session for May 9th. Mrs. Menafelli?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the May 9th regular session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary?
Mr. Yule?
Mr. Yule?
Yes, me.
I put-
Okay.
Yeah, that was me.
I
I
put
seconded
you
it.
anyway.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We also have an executive session for May 9th.
Which I move to table.
Second that.
On the motion to second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Just for the note, Mr.
It's table.
Mr. O'Leary
I second.
seconded that?
Yes.
Yes.
This time.
He fell asleep.
Okay. Michael Gilberto asked that we, again, discuss our meeting schedule. Let's pull it up.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Yes.
So, obviously noting that one member of the board is not here for the schedule, I suggest perhaps we could at least set the schedule for the month of June. And perhaps at the next meeting after the town meeting in June, set the schedule for the months of July, August, and perhaps September.
Okay.
Be our recommendation based on my understanding of limited board member availability
Mhm.
the week of June 27th, as well as my own anticipated absence, that the board meet in addition to Monday, June 6th, which is the town meeting, on Monday, June 13th, and Monday, June 20th. Monday, June 13th, we would intend to have the water rate hearing, and Monday, June 20th, we would intend to have the auditor here with the OPEB actuary to review the FY 20.
So we have 2 meetings in a row?
Correct. It actually ended up being 3 consecutive Monday meetings.
Yes, well. So the water rate will be on the 13th or the 20th?
The 13th would be our recommendation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a question on the dates. I mean, do we need to meet 3 times? I mean,
Do we what?
do we really need to meet 3 times? Can we combine? more
Well,
meetings?
the 6th is,
Town meeting, I know that.
It's town
I mean,
meeting.
Yeah, that we do anyway. But,
You mean put all business on the 20th?
put it all on the 20th. I guess OPEB has to be done on the 20th. I don't know why I think that, but for some reason I think that. I mean, I can make the meetings, that's not the point.
I mean, my recommendation would be, Michael, to meet on the 13th and the 27th.
No, you can't do that.
My understanding is that that at least 2 board members may not be available the 27th, nor am I available.
Oh,
on
that's
Monday.
right, okay. That's why fine.
I would say to you that we could try to do everything in one meeting. I just would advise that because the water rate hearing is probably at least 30 or 45 minutes, and the presentation, at least, and the presentation of the FY15 audit and the OPEB is probably another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, those two things will eat up a lot of time as it is. That's why we were suggesting we may want to stretch it. But certainly if the board wants to try to limit it to one meeting, we could try to do that as well.
Well, we can query the board on the night of town meeting again, and
See what's on the
Michael
plate.
should be back.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we'll have a better idea as to what's on our plate
Yeah.
for the next 2 meetings and
But the word to the wise is to
plan on it.
plan on it.
I'm not against just trying to get it all in one meeting, but, you know what happens. Could be a long night. And the water hearing is something that, you know, there could be people in the audience questioning what we're doing to the water rate.
And that was our concern.
Yeah. What would be very helpful is that we get in advance, and not in our packet, but even in advance, information from the Water Commission. Then at least maybe we'll have it digested and be in a better position to answer questions and move the discussion along. You all set with those dates, Steve, for now? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Town Administrator's report.
Mr. Chairman, I would just continue to ask the public to monitor the town website. We are concluding street sweeping. We expect to conclude it by Friday. That is the goal. Again, we've been able to expedite the progress by having the assistance of a contracted sweeper, and Mr. Moylan did have some recommendations as to how we may be able to generate additional efficiency in future years as well, using a combination of our own resources and contracted services. But last year, I think we went into the middle of July before finishing sweeping the town. The department set a goal of trying to get it done more timely, and it does appear that it's going to achieve the goal of having it completed before Memorial Day. And I would like to recognize Mr. Moylan, Mr. Deming, Mr. Sorgan, and the gentleman at the DPW for their work on this while balancing the other priorities. As an update for the board and for the community, we have received 21 resumes for the position of DPW director. I have assembled a screening committee to evaluate the resumes against the job description. The committee consists of Chief Michael Murphy, Finance Director Liz Rourke, Parks and Recreation Operations Manager Maureen Stevens, and Acting DPW Director Robert Moylan. The process will be facilitated by Human Resources Administrator Allison Olson. I've asked the committee to screen the applications and to conduct first interviews, and then intend to participate myself in the interviews of the semifinalists. I have a goal of having a new director on board on or about July 1st. Again, that is the goal at this point in time. The Board of Health conducted a mosquito and tick education class this past Wednesday, May 18th. It was attended by approximately 15 people. I'd urge the public to visit the Health Department webpage at www.northreadingma.gov/health-department to learn more. This is the time of year. There is a lot of information that's been put up on the Board of Health's website. I know Mr. Torres indicated he was at the event on Wednesday as well. And the goal is, as the Board of Health and the Health Department have been trying to do under Mr. Gracie's leadership, to get the information out there so that people know how to protect themselves. I attached for the board an update on the Attorney General's Housing Initiative Program here in North Reading. I had, for purposes of the fact that these documents are public, I've redacted the addresses involved, but I'm happy to provide detail if there's any questions by any individual board member. As you can see, in a few short months, we've seen progress on 5 properties. I'd like to recognize the work of Bob Racy, the health director, as well as the assistance of the building, police, and the fire departments in seeing progress on these properties. These have been lingering issues that have affected the quality of life of particular neighborhoods, and I believe we've seen significant improvement with minimal impact on the very residents that I think the board wanted to make sure we were protecting. And I would thank the board for its support in allowing us to go forward to try to address these issues. For the board's information, I attached the results of a recent licensing fee survey that we conducted. I'd like to thank Jane for her efforts in gathering this information. We were looking at, the only reason we went out to look for this information is because we had a license recently that we were not sure how to set the fee at. And at the time I had referenced that we had done some analysis, and when we did the calculation, we came up with a number that we recommended for the fee. But just for the board's information, we thought as a licensing authority, you ought to receive and know what the comparative data is out there. I don't know that any action is required. It's more informational in nature than anything else. Town has been advised of the availability of an affordable housing unit. There was a notice attached to the report, and I would urge any residents to look on the town website for more information regarding that unit. And I believe that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for the town administrator? Mr. O'Leary?
All set.
Mr. Yule?
No, I was relying on you to say something.
Oh, boy.
Okay, yes, a couple things. First of all, Kinder Morgan withdrew its application to FERC officially, and they claim insufficient demand as the reason. I guess, in many respects, it really doesn't matter as long as they withdrew, and I think that will make many residents in the
So
community.
this is a step from suspending to totally withdraw.
They
correct?
withdrew, that's correct, so.
So
It's
apparently-
done.
Apparently it wasn't true what they were saying, that there was a significant demand
Well,
that they were trying to meet.
It might have been that way when they first started to implement their idea, but I believe, especially with the Northeast Municipal Gas Pipeline Coalition, that was their big emphasis. Groups like that are made up of many different types of people. Most of the people were just against the pipeline, in all honesty. But, bless you, they concentrated on the facts and let the facts really speak for the coalition. So, and that's to their credit. And I was glad to be a part of it, and it was enjoyable to work with the TA. He did a super job, but it's done. Okay, I don't know what that does with the bill in the House with regard to, and I don't even know if it's a bill, it's in committee, I should say, with regard to the increasing the electric rates for future pipeline possibilities. So I don't know where that stands right now.
You mean against increasing the rates?
No, for increasing the rates.
Oh, the bill is for?
The bill is for, yes.
Oh, okay. I
Yes.
thought it was just the opposite.
No, the bill is for increasing the rate. So we have to, I still have to watch that and see
Mhm.
where that goes. And of course, Bruce Tarr did tell me that, he's keeping an eagle's eye on it to see if it comes to the Senate, and they have steps and
Mhm.
plans to oppose such an increase. And I think Brad Jones has the same thing. They're looking at it right now. They're trying to address it. So now it's a local issue, Okay. So,
Anything
that's
else?
good, that's good. Now, the other thing is, today I had the luxury, sometimes when you interact with people, you become more and more impressed, not only by their workload, but also by their intent and their integrity and what they do. I was with Amy Luckowitz today, and they had a meeting with regard to the upcoming legalization of marijuana in the state of Massachusetts. Now, the thing that I need to say first and foremost is that we're not talking about medicinal marijuana. That's all set.
Right.
Okay, that's not the issue. What's coming before, up for a vote in November is the legalization of recreational marijuana. And the information that's coming back, that, again, as opposed to when I was in my 20s, or when we were all in our 20s, okay, things that we were confronted with as far as drugs are nothing compared to the power of the drugs that are available today and the impact that it has on our brain. And it was interesting to hear that, the old argument used to be, it doesn't hurt you, marijuana doesn't hurt you, there's no problem with no side effects or anything like that, you just get a buzz and everything's okay. But now they measure, and I'm not familiar with the details, but there's a THC content that if it reaches a certain level, that it can impact your brain in a very short span of time. So, and make you addicted. There is now a push. At first, there was a push to, let's see how we can control it. Like we did as a board, we created a zone where they can have a plant, they can grow the grass, we put it on Concord Street. All right, that was one of the ways. But now the sentiment is to do whatever we can not to let this bill pass. All right, the mayor of Boston is against it. What's his name? There was a representative, Jason Lewis, I believe. Is that Jason Lewis? Is that the name that she mentioned? Went to Colorado to study, and he was on
Yeah,
the
right,
fence.
I read that.
Okay, and he's come back and he said, and the tax revenue, there is no benefit in the tax revenue, because whatever you get, you're gonna have to pay for all the problems that comes along with it. So it was very informative, and I'm glad I went, and I hope to go again and support whatever efforts that she has on it.
There's the
But-
CIT.
Yes, this was through the
Sponsored
CIT, yeah, yes. So, great job by her,
Glad
fantastic.
you had the opportunity to go.
So, that's it, thank you.
Catherine?
Just Memorial Day coming up
Yes,
for us to
Monday.
honor those who have died serving our country. So not that we're ever going to be able to repay that or honor enough or thank those that have died in service, but just to do something that day to remember them. Something
And of
big or
course, the town
small.
sponsors the Memorial Day activities at the cemeteries, and then followed at 10 o'clock by the parade. And I guess I'll ask the question, because I was going to ask it, since Catherine brought it up earlier, how many board members are going to be marching this year?
Well, I intend on going.
What?
I intend on going.
I think I might, I'm iffy, but generally I make it.
What?
Generally I make it.
Yeah,
I
Catherine?
think I might make it this year.
You might?
Yes.
Oh, very good.
Great. Why don't we walk together?
Well, don't we normally?
Yes.
And I believe Mike said he wouldn't make it because he's still away on vacation, so. Okay, anything else, Catherine?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Do you know who the speaker is for the,
Me.
again?
What?
Yes.
I think last year I asked if there were any volunteers, and I didn't get any, so I didn't bother to ask.
You could have asked.
It's okay, not a problem. I guess I was just going to talk about Memorial Day. You brought it up, so I'm not going to say much more. The town activities, it's always hopefully the weather, I listened to the weather forecast this evening before I came to the meeting, and it's 60% chance of rain, so hopefully they're wrong. And they've been wrong right along for the past few months. They seem to have missed it quite regularly, so hopefully we have a decent time and we're not marching in the rain and, following with the activities in the common. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. O'Leary. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?